Lesson 1.2, Transformations of Linear and Absolute Value Functions. Our essential question today, how do you write functions representing translations? Today we're going to use the summary chart that we did to do some practice problems. So we have two practice problems here. It says that we have the function 2 times the absolute value of x plus 1. So we know this is an absolute value problem. This is the f function. We want to write a g function when this graph is translated 3 units down. So first of all, we need to ask ourselves, what is this actually asking us? So what is it actually asking me? It is asking me to take my f of x equation and it wants me to move it 3 down. So move 3 down, is this an inside or an outside move? Downs are outside moves, so I want to do something on the outside. And if I wanted to go down 3, that means I needed on the outside to subtract 3. So this is the move that I need to do. And it wants me to do it to the f of x rule itself. So I'm going to take f of x. So here is my f of x. And you said on the outside, here are the parentheses, so on the outside of all this, I want to subtract 3. And it's telling me to name him g of x. So this function's name is going to be g of x. Now you said f of x and then subtract 3. Well, what is f of x? F of x is this equation that we already had written up there. So instead of f of x, I have 2 times the absolute value of x plus 1, because that is what f of x is. I just rewrote it. This is f of x. And now I'm supposed to subtract 3. And that is supposed to be my g function. If I have a minus 3 on the outside, he cannot all of a sudden go into the absolute value and then start doing some mathematics. So this is our final problem. So it said to write a function of g. So my g of x is 2 times the absolute value of x plus 1 minus 3. This is my entire g rule. So let's go ahead and do the other problem. It gives us an f of x rule. This is my f of x. It wants me to write an h rule by taking this function and translating it 2 units to the left. So first, what's it asking me? It's asking me to take the f of x rule that it gave me, and it is telling me to move it 2 to the left. So the translation that they are asking us to do is 2 to the left. Well, what does 2 to the left mean? Well, if I wanted to go left, according to our review chart on the front, that meant left is an inside move. And if I wanted to go left, on the inside, I needed to add 2. So to move left 2 on the inside, I needed to add a 2. So our new rule is going to be called h. Here is h for my new rule. I need to on the inside. On the inside meant on the f of x, on the inside where the x is, you told me to add 2. So this is my f rule. On the inside of my f rule, you told me to add 2. So here is my f rule. Here is me adding 2 on the inside. Now what does that mean? So here is the added 2 that you told me to do. He's on the inside. So how do we do this? So note to yourself, this means in the old f of x rule, we now need to write x plus 2 wherever x really was. So it was f of x is no longer x, is now f of x plus 2. So in this rule, wherever x was, we can't write x anymore. We have to write x plus 2. So h of x is going to be, I am going to rewrite this rule, absolute value of 2. I can't write x anymore because the x isn't the only thing here anymore. It's x plus 2. So I am going to write an x plus 2 now right where the x lived and write the rest of the equation exactly the way that it was. This right here is because this inside said I had to do x plus 2. On the inside where the x lived, I put the added 2 on the inside where the x lived. Now you can't leave it like this. So h of x is, I have the absolute value of, you have 2 times a parenthesis, multiply through the parenthesis. So 2 times x is a 2x, 2 times 2 is a 4. Close the absolute value because it was closed, and we are adding 1. So, quick review. It told me to do 2 translations to the left. You know that 2 to the left meant on the inside we had to add 2. So on the inside, wherever the x lived, the x needs to have a plus 2 next to it because you said inside with the parenthesis, add 2. There's my x. On the inside, add 2. Well, then we had to multiply this through so we knew what we had. You can't forget about the plus 1. So my rule for h of x is the absolute value of 2x plus 4 plus 1. So we have 2 more examples. They gave us an f rule. The rule that we are currently working with is the absolute value of x plus 3, and on the outside of that is plus 1. It wants us to write a rule called g, and it wants us to reflect it across the x-axis. So what is this asking us to do? It's asking us to take the f rule that they gave us, and they are asking us to reflect across the x-axis. So the translation that they're telling us is reflect across the x-axis. According to our summary chart on the front, if I wanted to reflect across the x-axis, we know that that was an outside move, and on the outside I needed to multiply by -1. So I'm going to take the f rule, and on the outside I have to multiply it by -1. Because I'm changing it, I had to give him a new name. It told me to call him G. So here is me calling him G. They said to take my f of x rule. So here's my f of x rule, and it said on the outside, multiply it by -1. So on the outside, I am going to multiply him by a -1. I know what f of x is because they gave it to me right up here. So I'm going to substitute the f of x with what the rule really is. So g of x is, I need my f of x, so I have this entire problem right here. And I'm supposed to multiply him by a -1. This entire problem is put into a parenthesis because this entire thing was f of x. You can't lose your order. So this entire problem was f of x, and this entire thing needs to be multiplied by -1. So that means that we need to distribute and we need to multiply through. Now you can't come in 2 in the inside of an absolute value. So he's just going to get multiplied to the absolute value, and when you do that, we have a negative absolute value, and -1 times 1 is a -1. So I have negative absolute value of x plus 3 because he had to multiply to the absolute value, so he's on the outside, and then +1 times a -1 is a -1. So this is my g of x rule. If it helps you to see, from here to here, I substituted, and I substituted what f of x was. From here to here, I distributed the -1. You cannot go inside a absolute value. So he just sat on the outside of it, so we still had it. Our last practice problem, we are dealing with the same f of x rule as we did before. They want us to come up with a new equation. They want us to call this new one h. And they want us to reflect across the y-axis. So this one is telling us to take the f of x rule that we had, and it wants us to reflect across the y-axis. Now this is the first time that we're doing a problem like this, but we have it on our summary sheet. So to reflect across the y-axis, reflecting across the y-axis was an inside move, and on the inside we had to multiply by -1. So this is the translation that I want to move, that I need to do. On the inside where the x lives, I need to multiply him by -1. They told us to call him h, and it says on the inside where x lived. So taking the f rule, on the inside where x lives, I needed to multiply it by -1. So here is me inside my f rule, and here is me multiplying by that -1 that I needed to multiply by. Now, how do we do this? It's like the previous problem that we did. originally inside my parenthesis was an x, so this was an x. The inside of my parenthesis is no longer an x. It's a negative 1x, which means I need to rewrite this f rule, but instead of this x right here, I need to write it as negative x. So let's go ahead and put a little asterisk right here that explains that. So my h of x rule, I'm going to rewrite the f rule. But when I say x, I am not going to actually write x. I'm going to write negative x. So it said absolute value of, I was about to say x, which means I need to write a negative 1x plus 3, close the absolute value, plus 1. The only change, so this negative x is right here because that is where x originally was in the very first problem that we had to have. So my final answer for h, my h rule is the absolute value of a negative 1x is the same thing as a negative x. So this is negative x plus 3 plus 1. This is my final h rule.